I am a huge fan of a little Japanese company known as Capcom. Right now, at the time of me recording this video, I say that Capcom's in a pretty good spot. There's a couple of projects that I'm really excited for that are coming out. Monster Hunter Wilds, Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, and of course, how can I forget all the awesome fighting game collections that they've been recently revealing? To me at least, I feel like Capcom has a bright future ahead. However, no company can have a perfect record. You're gonna make some mistakes from time to time. And with Capcom, they have definitely made some mistakes. Many people, me included, remember a certain era that Capcom went through during the years of 2012 to 2017. Now, I want to specify that even though I consider this the Capcom Dark Age, I'm not saying that there were only bad games coming out. You might even disagree that this is Capcom's Dark Age. I'm sure there's a bunch of FGC players that remember the infamous time of the PlayStation 2 and early PS3 and Xbox 360 generations. I more so consider this a dark age when it comes to the bigger stuff that Capcom was releasing at the time. Some examples that I can think of off the top of my head are Street Fighter Cross Tekken, Street Fighter V, DMC Devil May Cry, Resident Evil 6, Operation Raccoon City, Dead Rising 4, and that one game made by the people that made Life is Strange. I can't seem to remember the name. It's like on the tip of my tongue. Jokes aside, I bet most people have probably forgotten that this game even exists. It's kind of ironic with the fact that the title is literally called Remember Me. Around this time, many people were losing faith in Capcom. You can tell by looking at stuff like Metacritic and the less than stellar reviews these games were getting. My personal speculation for all these decisions being made at Capcom at the time was because of the disappearance of a pretty important figurehead in the Capcom ecosystem, Keiji Inafune. Say what you will about the guy, but he definitely had some influence in the company and made a lot of decisions that made a lot of these franchises what we know today. Then again, not every decision he made was great. He would end up leaving Capcom in 2010 so that he can make his masterpiece, Mighty Number 9.
Make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.
Well, I wouldn't say he was the sole guy responsible for everything going on in Capcom. In fact, I don't even know how many games he's actually directed. He still left an impact on the company. In fact, you can tell because one thing that these games seem to have in common is their want to appeal to the West. When Inafune was still working at Capcom, he had this mindset that games were not profitable in Japan and that the only way for Capcom to succeed is if they make their games for a Western audience. Now, I don't want to sound like one of those weirdos on Twitter complaining how Japanese games are being censored for the West. I more so think that Inafune's inherent want for more Western games under Capcom bled into Capcom as a whole. DMC is an obvious example.
Fuck you!
Fuck you!
Fuck you!
The series up to this point had a very specific style. Very campy, but rad as hell.
This party's getting crazy. Let's rock.
However, the DMC reboot went in a very different direction. If you look at some early footage of the game, it looked even edgier than what we ended up getting. To me, this doesn't scream Devil May Cry at all. It looks like any other 7th generation game that you would see edits of with Linkin Park music. Let's not forget about Ninja Theory, the team that was developing the game. did an interesting panel about the game when they were working on it. I'm just gonna show a picture of all the slides that were included in that panel, and you can see for yourselves on how they did not understand Devil May Cry. In Devil May Cry 5, they gave Dante a cowboy hat and had him do a gay little dance, which I'm sure was inspired by this conference. But I think you get the point on everything that's wrong with DMC Devil May Cry. Another thing that was impacted after Keiji Inafune left Capcom was the state of a certain Blue Bomber. For some reason, a bunch of projects that were planned were canceled. I still don't really know why. Maybe it was because Inafune was heavily involved with those projects, and without him, I assume the team felt very aimless. For the company's mascot, Mega Man was becoming a real afterthought for them. Mega Man 10, the last mainline entry, came out in 2010, and it took them 8 years for another game. Looking at the status of Mega Man now, it looks like it's gonna be another 8 years until we get a new one. Resident Evil is one of Capcom's most successful franchises, and it wasn't safe from dropping into mediocrity. Around this time, Resident Evil 6 came out, and it definitely had a mixed reception to say the least. It barely resembles its horror routes and went full action, and in my opinion, it does not work. I know this game has a lot of fans, and if you enjoy this game, good for you. But to me, this is not what Resident Evil should be. RE5 was already pushing the games to a more action focus, so 6 didn't really help it. There was another Resident Evil game that also doesn't have a good reception, and even less defenders. That game is Operation Raccoon City, one of many attempts of Capcom to make an online multiplayer Resident Evil game, and every time they try it, it never seems to work. I still have no idea why they are so obsessed with this concept, and when every time they try, they can barely have a consistent player base. It is beyond me. Street Fighter is one of the most important fighting games of all time. Hell, the most important game of all time. Without Street Fighter 2, the fighting game genre wouldn't even exist. But, as you guessed, the franchise was struggling at this time. There's an obvious game that I can bring up, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, but I might want to save that for a future video that I am planning. But don't hold me to my word. The one that I'm more interested in talking about is Street Fighter V. When Street Fighter V came out, it was in a very weak state. A small roster, no arcade mode on launch, and my least favorite thing about it, its art style. I prefer the way the backgrounds of Capcom Fighting Jam look. Wait, maybe I spoke too soon. These backgrounds look like a 12-year-old made it. Or worse, I made it. It took a lot of updates until Street Fighter V was in a good state, but it still baffles me that they released the game in that state. I thought Street Fighter 3 was a big enough lesson. Hopefully, this never happens with a fighting game franchise that people loves ever again.
What in the actual fuck?
Good evening, Johnny Cage.
Lastly, I want to touch on a series that I love personally, Dead Rising. Dead Rising was a big success for Capcom in the 7 generations of consoles, and became a huge franchise. With Dead Rising becoming a franchise, it was tough for them to match the quality of the first game. I definitely agree that 2, Off the Record, and 3 are good games, but you can't quite beat the original in my opinion. Still, the sequels have a reason to exist, and I definitely recommend you play them if you haven't. However, there is one game in the franchise that you should never play. Dead Rising 4 is everything wrong with this era incarnate. A bad interpretation of a beloved character.
Just kind of stuffy in here, don't you think? A little fresh air, you know. I really thought that would work.
A misunderstanding of what the gameplay of this series is known for, and above all else, an entry that just doesn't fit in the franchise. Dead Rising 4 is a painful experience and unfortunately left with the closure of a promising studio being Capcom Vancouver. I made this video to show where Capcom was at a point of time. I could probably mention other games such as Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which don't get me started on that game. But I feel like we are past this era, and Capcom is slowly getting their shit together. After the success of Resident Evil 7, I feel like it really changed the trajectory of the company, and has somewhat improved it. They're still definitely gonna make mistakes. Companies are never your friend. But I'd much rather have what we have now than whatever the hell we were doing before. Asura's Wrath and the Strider reboot were cool though. If you made it this far in the video, thank you very much. This is my first attempt at a YouTube video, and I hope it was good. I want to give thanks to a friend of mine, Luna, who made the lovely thumbnail and also looked over my script. And also, I guess this is where you're supposed to shill to like and subscribe, but more so I want to see some comments. I really want to improve, and I want to make more videos in the future, so any criticism is good for me. Yeah, I don't know how to end videos, so goodbye and have a good rest of your day.